Hello, I'm Mushahid Hussain from Pakistan, and I'm delighted to present another episode of Global South Voices on behalf of CGTN, China's premier television channel for the world. And Global South Voices basically presents a perspective representing the Global South, which is the world's majority. In today's episode, we have a very diverse and distinguished panel of experts to discuss several important issues. We have Mr. Erik Solheim from Norway. He is former Minister for Environment. He was head of the UN Environmental Program, and he is a prominent politician from Norway. We have from Malaysia, Professor Koh King Kee, who heads the Center for New Inclusive Asia, a new think tank, as well as the East-West Bridge, which talks about connectivity among civilizations. We have from Pakistan a very seasoned and prominent economist, a professor and a writer on economic affairs, Dr. Agdas Afzal. And we have from China, Dr. Shen Qi, who is also a leading expert on geopolitical issues and geotech issues. We would like to be discussing today the issue of overcapacity because there's a lot of hype in certain countries, especially the United States and even certain Western countries, about China's overcapacity. And we would like to discuss whether this hype is created for an economic basis, or is it driven by politics or geopolitics. Now I would like to go over to Dr. Agdas from Pakistan. And how do you see this situation given the context that there are some new realities? That China today is the leader in green technology, especially the production and export of electric vehicles and production of lithium batteries as well as solar panels. And at the same time, we see a swapping of roles. China has become the biggest exponent of open and free trade, while the US is now an exponent of protectionism and tariffs. Dr. Agdas, what is your take on this?
And I would largely start my comments by taking issue with the term or the semantics of overcapacity. I mean, what does it actually mean when, the US administration or intellectuals in the US say overcapacity? I mean, things do not come out of thin air. I mean, countries produce manufacturers or other exports because they have the ability to do that. So I think this idea of overcapacity or oversupply is probably a euphemistic term for saying that somehow China is engaging in unfair trade practices. I mean, this is what the US administration or officials are implying. So I think they might want to use a different term other than overcapacity because it doesn't make sense. Having said this, I think there are two main reasons why this kind of a narrative is developing out of the US. I think the first reason is an economic one. We have all seen that the stellar economic rise of China since it joined the WTO in particular has become a very, very big concern for certain Western nations. And they are probably losing sleep about what the world is going to look like if this phenomenal and stellar rise or exponential economic rise of China cannot be stopped. Because what this means is that the global world order that was put together by the victors of the Second World War after, around 1945 is going to then be, is going to transform and change very, very significantly. So I think that is one concern that certain Western nations have about China's stellar and exponential, amazing economic growth and how to make sense of that. And I think the second reason is political, because as you know that this is an election year, President Biden is facing a very strong challenge from Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was able to tear down the so-called blue wall in 2016. I mean, these are the traditional Democrat states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. And I think President Biden and members of his administration are worried again that the same thing could happen this year. So, very, very recently, we heard that President Biden is talking about tripling tariffs on steel and aluminum, especially when he goes to talk to workers and union members in Pennsylvania. So, I think we cannot really dissociate or decouple what is going on in terms of the policy utterances that are coming from United States and the domestic politics in United States. So I think this is the context in which these kind of statements are being made.
Thank you. Now over to Mr. Eric Soilham, because Dr. Akhtas has mentioned a combination of factors behind this hype on overcapacity. There's an economic basis because of China's phenomenal rise in the last couple of decades, as well as the politics of difficult election year in the United States. How do you see it from a European perspective based in Norway about this issue? And do you share this concern about overcapacity?
This is absolutely against common sense. Any American participant I have dropped into at any global climate conference over the last 15 years have said, we need to stop subsidizing and supporting what we do not want, which is fossil fuels, and we need all governments to start supporting what we do want, which is green products. And when China is doing that, they should be complimented, not criticized. Second, of course, this is completely against the entire history of the United States of America itself. Back in the 1940s, the United States was half the global GDP. Every second good made in the world was made in one place alone, which was the United States. That was, of course, because the United States had overcapacity. If you don't have overcapacity, you cannot export to the world. And the United States throughout history has had overcapacity and thus exporting to the world. And lastly, this is also completely against economic theory, as is taught at every university in the world. For global trade to happen, there must be overcapacity. If there is no overcapacity, every nation is making for its own market. If there is no overcapacity in Norway, well, we make for the Norwegian market. If there's no overcapacity in Pakistan, well, Pakistan produce for the Pakistani market. There must be overcapacity in one nation for it to trade with others. So what will be the proper response for the United States? Because, of course, there is a concern here. The United States is losing jobs. They believe that will be detrimental for Biden in the election campaign. And it's also a serious social issue in the United States, this feeling of problem. Look, what is the proper response? The United States of America and indeed Europe needs to get up early in the morning to compete with China. When China had problems in its own domestic electric car market, it invited Tesla to come, to go into the Chinese market, create more competition in the Chinese market, act as what they say, a catfish, which will force the others to compete more. Proper response for the United States when they cannot compete, well, that is to invite all the competitive Chinese companies into the American market to step up competition there. And then the United States in the long run, and Europe exactly the same, will be able to compete.
Yes, I think Mr. Eric Soilham, you've said it with a lot of strategic clarity, given your own expertise and experience in this important issue, that on the issue of climate change and green products, as you said rightly, China should be complimented rather than criticized. And the way forward for the US should be to compete rather than trying to confront China on an issue which is probably the existential issue for our planet. Thank you. I now move on to Malaysia, Professor Koh Keng Kee. How do you view that? Because Mr. Eric Soilham also pointed out the double standards. There was a time when US overcapacity was there after World War II, and they were exporting to the world and flooding the world with the US products, and nobody criticized that, and people welcomed that as part of free trade. So how do you see the US perspective on this issue of overcapacity? Is it a desire to maintain economic hegemony basically, or a failure to compete?
US deemed China as the only country that has the capacity to challenge US global primacy in both economically, technologically, and diplomatically. It deemed China as a long-term pacing threat. So it is using everything it can in suppressing China in every domain, economically, diplomatically, technologically. So it's just one of them. So this rhetoric coming out from the Washington elites is nothing surprising. There'll be more to come of things like that. So, but I think China's rise benefits the world. We from Global South, we welcome China produce cheap, good, a product for us. We can't afford to buy expensive goods from US, So, and China has also repeated many times China's rise is an opportunity for the world. I mean, US is welcome to compete, with China in these and new electric vehicles. And as the previous speakers have said, China has committed to this zero emission by 2030 or what, So China is doing all it can, contributing as a major economic power, as a responsible big power. So I think we should not be biased, US is simply furthering its geopolitical interests by all kinds of excuses. I think it's time for US to stop and realize, and take on China's challenge head on. We welcome that from the Global South.